Okay, I'm gonna be honest. I think it's time that we dive into Jeffree Star. So, if you've been watching my videos recently, you know that I've been doing this little thing where I've just been kind of detailing the rise and fall of certain YouTube creators and kind of pivotal moments in what defined when we talk about them now. And I've literally just been doing this because I've been traveling a lot, doing the shows, and on planes, I've just been doing like Google searches and looking into Reddit things and looking at old YouTube videos and just trying my best to kind of like timeline the careers of these people because there's been so many scandals, there's been so many feuds, there's been so many cancellations, and I just think it's really interesting. And today was the one I was most excited for because Jeffree Star, this one was the one that kind of took me the longest because Jeffree has had so many goddamn feuds with people. It is insane. And he just is, I was like researching this and I'm like, oh my God, he's genuinely a terrible person. Like he's actually a bad person. The amount of things that Jeffree Star has been called out for or has been confronted with and he still has a loyal fan base is just proof that like cancel culture does not exist. People love to preach, oh my God, cancel culture, cancel culture, cancel culture. It does. Why are my socks up so high? It's kind of a look though. It looks like when Ariana Grande would have the big boots on. It's also like, what time is it? It is 1 a.m. at the time that I'm filming this, and I'm leaving for the airport in a couple hours because I'm flying back to London. I'm seeing Beyonce tomorrow night with my mommy. So I'm very excited for that. But anyways, so far we've done one of these on James Charles, Gabby Hanna. Is that all? I feel like, oh, we did... No, I actually can't remember. I feel like I forget my videos the second I post them. So anyways, let's get into the Jeffree Star one, okay? So, with Jeffree Star, I think you can kind of put his initial rise down to kind of the era of like 2006 to kind of 2010-ish. This was whenever he was really big on MySpace. He was kind of one of the first people to really blow up on MySpace. And that was a really big thing because it was kind of one of the first social medias where people could kind of get a parasocial relationship with the creator, because it was one of the first times that we were able to interact with a person, you know, that often on a video platform, on, you know, a text basis. And it really was kind of the startup of what we know now with people, you know, having parasocial relationships with YouTubers or TikTokers or even just celebrities. MySpace was incredibly personal, and it was really during the initial years of it. And so it was relatively new, so there wasn't that much competition. And Jeffree was also so outlandish that he was such a big figure and such a big personality, for better or for worse, which caught up with him in the end, that he was really entertaining to people. And I think as well, one thing that I always speak about with Jeffree is I think that a big reason that he became so famous so quickly was because he fit the stereotype of a gay man that people kind of love, which is he was very over the top. He would make fun of himself, and he was basically like, I always phrase it like this. I think that Jeffree Star, the road cleaners are on my street. Love. Oh my God, this guy called Paul. He actually is one of the guys that kind of cleans around this time. I always go to the bodega around this time, and I always just have conversations with him in the street. I'm actually going to be really sad to move away from my New York apartment because me and Paul, who that was probably Paul, really just kiki sometimes. Love him. I always help him put the the bins in. Love. Community spirit. I always say this, but I think that Jeffree Star is a homophobic person's favorite kind of gay person, where Jeffree is inherently homophobic himself and also in recent years is like incredibly transphobic. So people who are homophobic love to be like, well, I love Jeffree Star, so I'm not homophobic. But then they like Jeffree Star because Jeffree Star's like, there's only two genders, and, you know, like, he's like very, 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 the rhetoric that he likes to say sometimes is just incredibly homophobic, transphobic, and I think that a homophobic person kind of loves, you know, Jeffree in that instance where they can kind of support a gay person, but like the gay person also has their same morals, because Jeffree is such a fucking panderer towards any fucking community that he thinks will make him money. And right now, not to skip ahead, he's obviously in his farm era and living in like fucking Wyoming or whatever, so he needs all these like Republican people to be, you know, funding him, whereas years prior he needed like gay teenage girls and boys, you know what I mean, buying makeup palettes. Now he needs people buying yak meat. So he'll basically just pander towards whatever people will accept him the most as, which is really sad and definitely shows that he's incredibly insecure, and he's also just a fucking loser. Oh, maybe that's Paul, actually. Okay, so yeah, he definitely started to rise with MySpace. And during this time as well was whenever he was starting to tour for the first time. He was doing these shows. We're going to dive into the Warped Tour and all the scandals with it a little bit later. I'm just trying to do like an overview really quickly. So he really started to tour after MySpace blew up. He was a really predominant figure. And then this was definitely when he started to get into a lot of fights online. And we saw the first one, which really was with Kat Von D. This is such an infamous piece of Jeffree lore, his fight with Kat Von D. And again, I want to dive into the actual fight later. I've kind of dived into scandals a little bit like I'm normally doing in more detail after I give you the full rundown. I like giving you a rundown of where we got to here, and then we'll dive into all of it. So this was really one of his first kind of public feuds. And again, it was with Kat Von D. He also, with Trace Cyrus, I think, had a huge fight. And also, he would often fight people that, like, were on MySpace or even just, like, watched or supported his videos, which I guess has kind of been something that happens a lot with Jeffree, where he literally will just kind of fight, like, anyone that he can. And now, I think in 2014 ish was whenever he launched Jeffree Star Cosmetics, which was wildly successful because his YouTube channel was growing rapidly at this time, and he was posting daily on YouTube. He was posting weekly. He was doing these makeup collabs. He was doing makeup reviews, and Jeffree was kind of well respected as an honest person reviewing makeup. And so he really gained a lot of support for kind of not being a sellout, because he was also promoting Jeffree Star Cosmetics while doing reviews of like Kylie Jenner's makeup. So he was being brutally honest, and people were like, oh, we can trust Jeffree because he's being honest and isn't being bought out by these companies. But what people didn't realize was Jeffree was actively promoting Jeffree Star Cosmetics to you. So he wanted to, you know, speak honestly about other brands, because then he could speak highly about his own brand. So he definitely was a fraud in those years of kind of manipulating people into thinking that he was truly an honest person who cared about your money. If anything, he was just trying to put down other brands so that he could further highlight that his one was great, which again is incredibly smart. And still to this day, people will be like, Jeffree's the only honest makeup reviewer. And I'm like, girl, you're dumb as hell. You're dumb as hell. But again, it was a really smart business move for him to do that, if I'm being completely honest. So yeah, over the years of like 2014 to 2017, I think, it was just rapid growth for Jeffree. He was blowing up on Instagram. He was blowing up on YouTube. And again, he was really solidifying himself as one of the most well-respected people on YouTube, which is hilarious to think about that now. I'm not even talking about the beauty community. He was probably the most respected in the beauty community, but he ended up becoming one of the most respected YouTubers during this time. He had one of the fastest growths, and again, he was really, really, really in this parasocial with his audience, and people fucking loved him. So Jeffree from 2014, whenever the channel was launching, until about 2017, was really in his bag and loved by the masses. And then in 2017, this is whenever we had our racism apology video. So also, I'm so like uncomfortably moving around right now. I've had to move over to shorts because if I could film this video in my fucking underwear, I would. It's so fucking hot and humid in New York right now. God, I can't wait to go to rainy London tomorrow. I actually can't believe I'm saying that, but I can't wait to go to rainy London. In 2017, this is whenever we had, like I said, the racism apology video. Now, this was because old footage had resurfaced of Jeffree mocking black women, saying he was going to throw battery acid over a black woman, and also using the N-word very frequently, and just kind of saying a lot of slurs. This all resurfaced, and this really had a huge impact on his career, and he kind of ignored it for a little bit, and then he came back with the racism video. Remember the racism video where it's him in the thumbnail, and he's like serving face in the thumbnail? Ridiculous. I make fun of that every single night whenever I do a show. So that was that video. So he did the racism video, and he said that he was angry, hurt, and didn't know how to process his emotions at that time in his life. And I'm going to be honest, the public really forgave him. You know, he posted this video, as ridiculous as it was, because I feel like unanimously people make fun of it now for how ridiculous serving face in a racism apology video is. The public forgave him, and they forgave him really quickly as well. And I think at this stage, people had such a parasocial with Jeffree that all it took was for him addressing it for them to think morally that it's okay to support him again. So Jeffree got off very, very, very easy with the first racism scandal in 2017. Now, I would say that between the right before the racism video happened and then it happening, while the public forgave him, it definitely tarnished his image a little bit and kind of set back his growth a little bit. But that didn't last for very long, because ultimately in the years, past that, 2017 and 2018, I would say that these were quite honestly the biggest years of Jeffree's career. He was releasing successful palettes. He was blowing up on YouTube. He was getting millions upon millions of views. He was doing makeup opening events at like Morphe and all these stores. He was doing meet and greets. He was at the peak of his career. So while the racism video kind of halted him momentarily, it didn't impact him in the long run at that time period. It ultimately did, but not back then. And then moving forward, he started doing a lot of collabs during this era as well. So he definitely kind of focused on solo content reviewing at the start, but then he started really getting in the industry. And this is whenever we saw him doing collabs with Manny MUA, Laura Lee, Gabrielle Zamora. And ultimately, as we know, they got a lot of views doing this, collab kind of machine together, where Jeffree would post on Gabrielle's channel, and then Gabrielle would post on Jeffree's channel. Jeffree would be on Laura's channel, and then Laura would be on Jeffree's channel. It was very, very, very transactional, but people loved the idea of their friendship, and they also just loved the videos. The videos were fun, they were lighthearted, and they kind of were about makeup, but they were more so about like their friendship. And I think people really loved that, because the people that loved Jeffree got to see Jeffree in, a more carefree light. He was with his friends. And people that liked Laura, now you got to see Laura with Jeffree or with Manny. And then all of their audiences kind of merged together, and it was just a recipe for absolute clout. And they really rode this wave. They all, were experiencing career high view count at this time, and people were loving them all together. Now, obviously, this did not last very long, because in 2018, Dramageddon 1 happened. 1 of 3, by the way. So Dramageddon 1 happened, and this was whenever Jeffree was kind of being accused of being a horrible person behind the scenes. We were starting to see some of these people that he had befriended in the industry kind of like make snarky responses in their videos about him, saying snarky statements, and the public perception of Jeffree was going a little bit iffy, because kind of all of his friends were indirectly talking shit about him. And so it started to paint a picture that maybe Jeffree wasn't a great person. However, Jeffree was able to control this narrative as well. So, Manny, Laura, and Gabrielle Zamora were the people that were involved in Dramageddon 1. And ultimately, they had done a tweet where it was them holding the middle finger up, and the caption was like, "Bitch is bitter because without him we're better," or something like that. So fucking cringy, but so goddamn iconic. Now, immediately, the public knew that this was about Jeffree. However, the public immediately went on Jeffree's side. They looked at Laura, Gabrielle, and Manny as incredibly bitter and incredibly petty. And the public up until now did not know that Jeffree was as evil and petty as what he was. So Jeffree looked like he was really being wronged by his friends here. So the public immediately took Jeffree's side. And in this, Gabrielle, Laura, and Manny started to kind of deflect and accuse Jeffree of being a bad person, because at this time they were kind of reiterating people and redirecting people to Jeffree's racist past. Now, this was one of the worst decisions that I think any of them could have made, because in an attempt to discredit Jeffree and redirect people to this, Jeffree's racist, people then started going through Gabrielle, Laura, and Manny's social medias and find a lot of racist stuff on there. So then all of that blows up. Jeffree distances himself. Jeffree had already apologized loosely in his racism video, so the public could forgive Jeffree, but they're now dealing with the news that Gabrielle, Laura, and Manny are racist. And so anyways, it then turned into this thing where all of the audiences left those three, all went to Jeffree. Jeffree got to distance himself and act sad and hurt that his friends would drop him. And he also got to enjoy the fact that his friends were now in a racism scandal. And you know that he was probably enjoying that, because he doesn't care about actual racism. So he would post these shady Snapchats basically celebrating their downfall, and people started to live for the fact that Jeffree Star was vindicated from his evil, evil, evil friends. So that was Dramageddon 1. Very, very, very summed up. So anyways, we kind of move on Also, in years later, we end up finding out that Jeffree instigates so much within Dramageddons, and specifically Dramageddon 1 as well. So obviously, in hindsight, we know a lot more is different. Now, this is also when we got the iconic Laura Lee, oh my god, video as well, which was everything. God, that video was terrible. The internet collectively forgetting about what her scandals were because her apology video was so fucking terrible. Girl, you need an award for that. So anyways, we then move on to Dramageddon 2 and Dramageddon 3. So in May, so that was 2018 with Dramageddon 1, but then if we fast forward a year to 2019, Jeffree had started collaborating with James Charles a lot at the end of 2018 and 2019. And this friendship was everything in the eyes of the YouTube community. It looked like Jeffree was, you know, a mentor, taking James under his wing. James's audience and James had one of the fastest beauty guru channels. So Jeffree got to see that and enjoy his audience as well. And then Jeffree was piggybacking off of James' recent success. James was piggybacking off of Jeffree's OG success. And they were both basically using each other and doing these collabs, which is really funny because I did watch a couple of their collabs when I was preparing for this video. And it's very clear that Jeffree actually fucking despises James Charles. And it's just really fun. I would recommend going and watching one of their collabs together, specifically their one with Tati Westbrook, because it just goes to show that they absolutely fucking hate each other. It's really funny to watch in hindsight. So obviously, you know, May of 2019, the iconic bi-sister Dramageddon 2 with Tati Westbrook exposing James Charles. Now, we've talked about that, so I just want to talk about Jeffree's involvement. So Jeffree was very supportive of Tati when this video came out, which again kind of confirmed to the audience that James was as terrible as what he is, because Jeffree had been collaborating with James up until this point, and then Tati was exposing James, Shane was exposing James, Jeffree was exposing James. It basically was everyone against James Charles. And then it kind of reiterated that James was this dangerous person. So Jeffree backed Tati's video. And also behind the scenes was instigating with the people that were involved. He was reaching out to Sam, the waiter. He was in leaked text from James Charles' No More Lies. Jeffree was trying to organize people to expose and speak up against James. And so Jeffree was instigating a lot. And whenever James was in this downfall, Jeffree was trying to make it 10 times worse so that he could get rid of his biggest competition at the time, James Charles. He was calling James a danger to society in these texts and was accusing James of predatory behavior. He was tweeting things like, everything Tati said is true. And he then later admitted that he shouldn't have inserted himself in the drama, which is a common thing with Jeffree, where he will get involved in something, he will get backlash for being involved in it, or it won't work out the way he thought. And then he'll be like, I shouldn't have involved myself in that. So we go on to Dramageddon 3, and Dramageddon 3 was probably the one that had the biggest impact on Jeffree's career to this day as well. And this is definitely one that Jeffree was unable to come back from. So it took 3 of the Dramageddons of Jeffree, you know, putting other people down, but he definitely did get his karma in the long run. So in June of 2020, Tati Westbrook returned. I also can't believe that her video Breaking My Silence was only a year after Bye Sister. It felt like there was an eternity in between that, but clearly not. In this video, Tati basically really shifted the narrative from James to Jeffree and Shane, and that they were instigating things and they were manipulating her behind the scenes. Now, the public were kind of split on this. They didn't know whose side to take, but it definitely kind of, putting Tati aside, kind of made people very fatigued of Jeffree constantly being involved in drama. I'm not saying that everyone immediately took Tati's side, because the video was kind of 50-50 in the reception, but a lot of people were definitely kind of like, oh, we're so tired of Jeffree Star being involved in things. And so he started to lose a lot of his momentum on social media around this time. Tati was accusing Jeffree and Shane of being the reason that ultimately she made the video, that they were helping her give information, that they were pressuring her into doing the video. And again, this really hurt Jeffree's credibility, just because people didn't like that he was constantly involved in yet another thing to do with something behind the scenes. But I'm not going to say that people immediately took Tati's side, because people really didn't like her either. Now, this was definitely the start of the end for Jeffree's career, because on that same month, very, very quickly after that, Morphe actually dropped Jeffree Star Cosmetics, which was a huge thing because you could argue that Morphe would have been nothing without Jeffree Star, but they dropped him due to public backlash, and Morphe ended up going down under anyways. It was probably one of the worst career decisions they could have made when it comes to money, but morally was probably the best one they could have made, but they had no problem standing behind him years previous. They then confirmed, Morphe kind of publicly confirmed that they were, you know, severing ties with Jeffree as well, because a lot of people were like, Morphe, where do you stand? Which is funny because they'd been supporting him for so long up until this point as well, which is just like, again, people were just so hypocritical in that, being like, oh, now we want Morphe to drop Jeffree because we don't like him. I'm like, girl, you were supporting him for years prior. Shut the fuck up. So Morphe dropped Jeffree, and this was definitely one of the biggest hits to Jeffree's career, and this was definitely probably the first thing that really affected him financially as well, which was definitely a big problem for Jeffree. Also, this was during the time when other influencers were starting to really speak up about Jeffree, and it was quite just popular to hate on Jeffree, which kind of fueled this narrative of people being able to finally speak about things they always wanted to speak about when it came to Jeffree. What is that? What truck is that? Girl, stop. This is what happens when you film videos late at night. We're just going to enjoy that it's beautiful ambience, okay? Or that it's a siren of a police coming for Jeffree because we're about to talk about his allegations. So anyways, a lot of people in the industry started talking and shitting on Jeffree and speaking about their bad experiences. And again, this further only just pushed this narrative that Jeffree Star is a very, very, very evil person. And again, people just had this absolute fatigue for Jeffree Star. And there was very, very, very little Jeffree could do to come back from this, if I'm being completely honest. People started to really stop buying Jeffree Star Cosmetics. A lot of retailers started pulling oh my god, they stopped. Yippee, yippee. A lot of retailers started pulling his products. And again, it was very clear that he was losing a lot of money from this. And then it was a month later, again, seemed like a lot longer in the moment, Jeffree uploaded the Doing What's Right video where he sat on the gold fucking couch and deflected all of his scandals because the racism came up again, even more came up. And he basically deflected in that video, which took him so long to make in the grand scheme of things because it had been years in coming. He deflected it to the Black Lives Matter movement and basically kind of flipped the narrative on the audience. And he was like, if you care about me more than you care about the Black Lives Matter movement, you need to look inwards. So he just tried to use the entire movement to get out of a scandal, and people did not take this well. And then this yet again was another moment of, oh my god, Jeffree Star is so ignorant, arrogant, and a terrible person that he would do this, specifically in what the climate was. And this was not a good video, and it did not go down well at all. And the fact he sat on that gold-ass couch, girl, put on a gray fucking hoodie like everyone else and sit behind a white wall. Fucking hell. How hard is that to do? Again, it was a video of deflection. He never mentioned James or Taddy's name, I don't think, in the video. He specifically didn't mention James's name. I may be wrong in that, but I watched the video a couple weeks ago, and I don't think he even directly addressed what was going on. He did kind of mention about that people thought he was going to drop Shane, and he was like, I would never do that, which was funny because in the weeks leading up to the video, he was disassociating himself as much as possible with Shane Dawson. Because also at this time, this is when Shane was, you know, in the scandal as well. Okay, so also, before I get into all of the allegations, I do want to talk about Jeffree from kind of then until now. So Jeffree was releasing a bunch of palettes during COVID, and people weren't really that interested in them, and I think a really bad decision he made was releasing a palette called Cremated during the time when millions of people were dying of COVID. He was literally, while we were in a pandemic, releasing a palette that was all centered around being fucking cremated, which was happening on a mass scale because there weren't enough room for burials of people dying of COVID, which, again, was such a bad thing to do, and the public did not like it at all. And I would say that was one of the last memorable palettes that Jeffree Star Cosmetics did. And then the public really just didn't care anymore. They were like, you're a horrible person. He also released a pet line, Jeffree Star Pets. Don't know if anyone remembers that. Don't know what happened with that. He released a skincare line. Don't know what happened with that as well. It really fell off with the pet line. And he also moved to a yak farm. He rebranded as a farmer. I love this whenever YouTubers get canceled and then they just decide, what's my next thing gonna be? Am I gonna be incredibly conservative or am I gonna be a yak farmer? And Jeffree decided to be both. So Jeffree moved to Wyoming from California, sold his mansion, and did this entire narrative that he didn't want that California life anymore. And a lot of people did like it. People liked the idea of him pulling back and this new farmer life. It was so random as well, and it was so memed on. But a lot of people just saw it as a desperate ploy to deflect from all of his scandals. And I would say that moving to Wyoming was probably the biggest career suicide Jeffree could have ever fucking done. Because even when he was in California and being involved in scandals, he always came back from them. But now he really is a nobody. So he got all these yaks, he raised these yaks, and then he said that they're just his friends and he just wants to be a farmer. Now, then the trademark for Jeffree Star, like meat, launched, and he attacked every single person making videos on it, myself included, saying that they're his friends, he would never eat them. And then tell me why 2 weeks later, we have a Jeffree Star makeup and meat store, which he promotes this store, and it's in Wyoming. He promotes this store as the men can come in and buy meat and the women can come in and buy makeup. What the actual fuck? And this, store is still existing. It's a very weird concept. It's also like half Jeffree Star museum, like his cars are in it and it's like a flex thing. But that's why he kind of panders towards the more conservative crowd now, because he has this store where the gay boys from California are not going in and buying, the makeup and meat. You know what I mean? So he needs to pander towards the people out in Wyoming. No shade to y'all out in Wyoming. His YouTube channel really has flopped ever since this moment compared to what he used to get. And I don't think he ever came back from this. So again, I think that Jeffree's new cowboy era away from the industry was definitely something that I think he probably was hoping to do momentarily and then go back into the California life and stuff, because that he loves being in the industry. And I don't believe the narrative that he doesn't want to be involved in the industry or whatever like that. I think the recent cancellation lost him a lot of money and he, had to downsize to keep the life that he wanted, because that mansion was insanely expensive. Now, I want to dive into the scandals, okay? So, first of all, I want to go to the Kat Von D scandal. So, the Kat Von D scandal was, again, one of his earliest feuds. And this Kat Von D, the tattoo artist, obviously, and beauty guru, one of the OG. This was because in 2016, Kat Von D accused Jeffree of bullying, racism, and him not paying one of their friends for them creating the Jeffree Star Cosmetics logo. This blew up, and Jeffree responded with a video denying everything that she said in that. And I would say that a lot of, if not majority of the internet took Jeffree's side. Again, he really hadn't been involved in any scandals at this stage, so Jeffree seemed pretty reliable, and he seemed like he was being done wrong by a friend. So Kat Von D really came out bad in that one. Also, Kat Von D's really fucking weird. Now, also, within the time of all of these scandals, Jeffree was in a relationship with Nathan Schwartz, that's not his name. Schwartz is the one from Vanderpump. Nathan. He was in a relationship with Nathan, okay? And this was a relationship that was like an OG YouTube relationship. I think they were together for like 5 or 6 years. They were YouTube's golden couple because people loved how strong they were, how they were always together, how they really seemed to love each other, how Jeffree was so over the top and Nathan was so subdued. And they just had this very sweet on-camera life together, and people ate that shit up. And then ultimately, they broke up, and Jeffree announced this in a video titled, "We Broke Up," aptly named, in January of 2020, and he really hasn't stopped talking about the relationship ever since. And Nathan ended up moving on and started dating a woman, and they're like posting each other all over TikTok, and Jeffree really always talks about how that was the only love that he'll ever have in his life. But whenever he broke up with Nathan, he started like allegedly hooking up with all these like NBA players and stuff like that, and rappers, and was doing this like desperate social media posting that he was getting fucked every day, which was definitely him being like, "Nathan, look, I don't need you." It was very cringy and very embarrassing. Now, the last one that I want to talk about is the Jeffree Star sexual assault allegations, because in 2020, Business Insider published an article that basically reported multiple people speaking. I'm sweating so much. I hate how humid it is in New York right now, and it's literally like 1 a.m. Business Insider released this article that was talking about multiple people alleging that Jeffree had, either SA'd them or was physically violent towards them during the late 2000s. Gage Arthur, who was one of the people, claimed that Jeffree used a taser on him and performed non-consensual oral sex after allegedly giving him an Ambien in 2009. Now, Arthur spoke up, but then retracted everything that he had said. An insider actually reported that he was allegedly paid $45,000 through Jeffree Star Cosmetics CFO, and allegedly a little bit of hush money, which is crazy because then Jeffree came out with a palette called like Blood Money or something like that. Very, very, very weird. So Gage spoke up and then retracted. Insider found out that allegedly Gage was offered $45,000. Another accuser, Chris Avery Bennett, stated that Jeffree sent her explicit images when she was only 15 years old and harassed her online. She claimed, allegedly, that she was offered $10,000 to recant the statements, which she refused. Now, this doesn't just end there. Jeffree genuinely is horrible because whenever he was on the Warped Tour around the MySpace era, literally multiple Warped Tour staff members alleged that Jeffree would routinely kind of interact with underage looking fans, bring them on stage, and would allegedly engage in like sexually suggestive behavior with them, including allegedly groping them and allegedly like grip kissing them as well. Jeffree was also accused of using a stun gun, allegedly, on one of these people. And one incident was allegedly involving Gage Arthur in a movie theater parking lot where Jeffree allegedly tasered Gage, allegedly. Now, the Warped Tour management had allegedly banned Jeffree from performing because of these behaviors. And again, all of this was exposed in 2020, but because of the Tati Westbrook comeback video, the James Charles of it all, the Shane Dawson of it all, these allegations are very rarely talked about. And it's crazy when I was diving into all this, how much shit he has been involved with public feuds, sexual assault allegations, violence allegations, being an evil person. I'm just like, he genuinely is one of the worst creators and one of the worst people that we've ever seen on YouTube. And I guess it's quite beautiful that his career really did fall off. You know what I mean? No one is keeping up with Jeffree Star anymore. So there we go. There is the rise and fall summarized of Jeffree Star. Let me know if I missed anything and what things stand out to you the most, and we'll talk about it down below. And I'll see you all very soon, and goodbye.